What is up, and welcome to the Bruin Bible. Will Decker here. We got a LA Football Network-centric cast. It's Will Decker with Cary Krongard and Jamal Madni. You've probably read some of their articles. They're both fantastic writers for the LA Football Network. And it's reached the midseason point for UCLA football. We're going to be breaking down exactly what's gone right for them, what's gone wrong, and kind of how they're going to fare the rest of the schedule. We had a game this past weekend that, let's say, was not as favorable as we would have liked, guys. We pulled it out 34-16 over the University of Arizona Wildcats. But, boy, I mean, it was getting a little, sweaty there on the sidelines. It was 17-16 late in the third quarter. It was a one-possession game in the fourth quarter, a team that has now lost 17 straight. I'm going to start with you, Cary. What did you see from UCLA this weekend? And how kind of disappointed were you in the result of not getting a blowout necessarily?
It's tough. I mean, coming off the loss to Arizona State, I think that was the moment where all of us sort of kind of said that this is a bit alarming, and maybe this team isn't quite as good as we hoped, and we need to start seeing wins. And it's tough to make a judgment about that, whether they can get back on their feet based on, facing an Arizona team that is 0-5 and is quite frankly not very good. And, we'll be facing Washington, which is not a gimme, but probably one of the easier opponents left comparatively, considering that we have to play Oregon, then go to USC, go to I have the schedule next to me somewhere. We go to USC, we go to Utah, right? So yeah, this game, I mean, I remember flipping it on before halftime and seeing that DTR interception, and I was just like, that was just a terrible throw. You can't throw that ball. And he's been better protecting the football for most of the season, but that was sort of a repeat of what we've seen from him in the past. So I don't know, man. I'm glad we got the running game going again, but. And certainly when you're running the football well, then you're not going to have as many passing yards. But to have another day where DTR is under 50%, under 100 yards passing in this day and age, it's alarming to me because that's not going to get it done against the better teams. And I think when he's been on, he's looked very good. But it's just sort of this roller coaster that we've seen from him and from Chip Kelly's Bruins overall. I think, the key word is consistency, and that's sort of what's in doubt at this point in the season. And we know every week matters at this point because this is the best team Kelly's had. And if not now, when, right? So, yeah, I think there's a bit of uneasiness in Westwood considering what we've seen from the Bruins as of recent. And I don't think that's going to go away until we start seeing this team play up to their potential consistently week to week against the best opponents.
Completely agree. I'm going to send it down to my man, Jamal. Jamal, what were your thoughts about the UCLA football team in Tucson this weekend? Kind of a tough one.
Yeah, well, it felt like the classic trap game, maybe a little emotionally hungover from ASU, looking at this kind of three-game gauntlet that's ahead. It was sort of natural that this was sort of the valley and a bit of a trap game. But I think what was concerning is that a couple things. One was, it was a one-possession game midway through the fourth quarter, as you alluded to, a team that, is struggling against FBS competition. I think number two is up until really that second drive of the second half when it was 17-16, the 5 possessions that Arizona had up until that point, 4 of them resulted in points, and 1 was a turnover on downs inside the UCLA 30. So they were able to move the ball really at will for the first 2.5 quarters of the game. And then I think the third piece was DTR having 1 completion in the entire first half. He had as many completions to Arizona as he did to UCLA for 30 minutes of football. And so that sort of begs the question where if he really is banged up in terms of kind of cumulative effect of injuries from Stanford through Arizona State and into this past week, why didn't Chip give him a week off? Let Garbers come in. All Garbers would have to do would be turn around and hand the ball off anyway, and let DTR kind of get ready for this second half stretch. But if there's nothing wrong with DTR physically, how do you go 1 for 7 in the first half in this day and age when, you can have bubble screens, you can have checkdowns, you've got really easy throws to make. So I think those are the 3 things that jump out as concerning. But bottom line, they got the win, and now they're headed to the second half of the season.
Yeah, and we've seen that from DTR before too, right? He has these games, he has these stretches where he's just off and he's missing open receivers, and he's going to be the guy. I'm not, it's ride or die at this point with him. It's, he's a senior, but again, like you said, it's not like this is a pretty wide open offense. I mean, there are issues we can nitpick, but it's generally an offense that, is quarterback friendly. It's not like he's playing Iowa right now, right? So to have these games, and I remember Hawaii too, where your 1-2 completions, that's just not going to get the job done. So, like you said, at the end of the day, the win is important, but I think coming off that loss, and then, just in terms of something else you said, the defense, I think is really the biggest question. And that's been a question for years now. While the blame has gone in the feet of Jerry Azzinaro, I'm always a little unsure of how much blame to put on coordinators versus players. But at the end of the day, it's a results-oriented game, and that's Kelly's guy, and he's going to have to take responsibility when this defense isn't performing, and especially coming off Arizona State, where the defense was just pitiful, wide open guys, coverage busts. That's another aspect where when the offense isn't good enough to kind of pick up the slack, then this team's not going to win football games. And the thing with UCLA is under Chip Kelly is that they the range of outcomes is so big, right? Like at their best, we saw him take a not very good team his first year and beat USC. We see them have an insane comeback against Washington State a few years ago, and at their worst, they're losing to, I think it was San Jose State a few years ago, right? So it's just kind of a big roller coaster with them, and it's they're really capable of looking really good or looking really bad, just sort of depending on what the mood or the feel of the team is that day, I think.
Completely agree. I do want to have a discussion about DTR at some point. 1 of 8 in the first half for 3 yards is brutal. That pick right before halftime too. I mean, that is just bad. Classic DTR.
Yeah, that was bad.
On the season, he's got 11 touchdown passes, 2 interceptions through the air, 250 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns rushing. But the thing that's been the most noticeable thing for me was last year was the first year he completed over 60% of his passes, which gave us a little bit more hope. He was at 65% last year. He's reverted back to the 50s, only completing 57% of his throws. I kind of want to have an open dialogue with this. I loved what DTR did against Stanford. Granted, he was not 100%. But, boy, I mean, we really should have turned to Garbers against U of A. I completely agree with Jamal is saying. He was not 100% healthy out there. But I'd like to see what this offense looks like with a non-DTR situation. We've had DTR here for 3 years now, and, we thought this could be the year he could turn the page. I mean, he has all the talent in the world. I'm just not convinced. If something happens against Washington this weekend where he plays similarly in the first half, we're going to lose. He did this against a team that has lost 17 in a row, that had lost at Northern Arizona University. Like, that is as bad as it gets from an FBS standpoint. Luckily, our run game is top 15 in the country. We're actually ranked 15th in the nation, and we ran for the most rushing yards against a program since 2013. We ran for 329 yards on the ground, most of which coming between Britton Brown, who had a hell of a game, happened to be his birthday. He balled out on his birthday. That's awesome. And then Zach Charbonnet as well, 117 yards. We got 2 cowbells, and we got a great offensive line to match. I think those are positives. But I also have a lot of questions, like, why is Greg Dulcich only getting 3 catches? I mean, I've hammered this point home on the podcast all year. You have something that no other team really has in the Pac-12. You have the most dynamic tight end in the receiving game. We've seen it. He's done it against the big programs. He's done it against LSU. He's done it against SC. There's a couple games where he wasn't even targeted. And, Chip Kelly is known as this genius coordinator, specifically with the run game. But, boy, when you have something like that, give it to Dulcich a little bit more. I mean, he did lead the team in catches this weekend. And, some of those throws were not going Dorian Thompson-Robinson's way. But this dates back to Fresno State, a game we lost where he didn't even have a catch. It dates back to Hawaii in the season opener. Granted, we blew him out, but not to even really target Dulcich more than 1 or 2 times. I think that's unacceptable. I'd also like to see some more Kaz Allen. Kaz Allen, huge kickoff return. I think it was a 75-yard kickoff return from the end zone. Had a 24-yard reverse that was nearly a touchdown. He's finally getting the ball again, but, I mean, we saw this to begin the season as well. Hawaii had that huge 45-yard touchdown catch. The first series against LSU, he made big plays. Tell me I'm wrong with we should want more Kaz Allen and Greg Dulcich, Jamal.
Well, you're not wrong at all. And I think it's a little bit puzzling with this version of Chip, right? The Chapter 2 UCLA version of Chip, where he's running an offense that really relies a lot on bunch formations and tightening the line, and which was completely different than what he did at Oregon, which was spread it out. And as a result of that, I think what he's really done is really emphasize the run game, and he's kind of treating the pass game as a camouflage. But to your point, what that does is it really kind of makes you one-dimensional in how you have to go about your business. In the 4 games that UCLA's won, they've led for all but 5 minutes and 29 seconds. This is a team, when you run that type of offense and those types of formations, they're not really built to come from behind. They're not really built to throw the ball when you need to throw the ball. A lot of the stats that you mentioned with DTR, they look really great on paper, but it's all play action. It's all play action. First progression, second progression, balls out. He's not really going through his progressions the way a traditional quarterback would. And so you have to sort of limit the playbook. You talked about Dulcich. Yeah, he's the best receiver in the Pac-12 this side of Drake London. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. You talked about Kaz Allen. How about another guy, Cam Brown? 127 yards receiving on the season. 111 of them were in one game. The guy's got one catch through the other 5 games of the season. These are clearly folks that can make plays, be more explosive, and you can sort of pepper it around more to other people. And so it's either a situation where Chip is still kind of keeping the reins on this offense in a way where he maybe knows DTR's deficiencies, or it's a situation where DTR is just not going through enough of his progressions, or a combination of both, which isn't resulting in pretty offense here. But I couldn't agree with you more.
What about you, Cary? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, Jamal, you made a really good point. The tightening of the formations is something that I don't really. I mean, it's worked at times for the run game, for the counter game, but we've seen this team when they go spread, when they go hurry up. I mean, they're hurry up most of the time, but when they have that spread look, they have success, and I think that generally is what makes sense for college football these days with the hash marks. So, no one's expecting him to go back to the blur offense, but I personally don't really understand his insistence on kind of doing this weird multiple, hybrid pro style, tight formation game. I'm with you there. Of course, he's not calling me up and asking me what he thinks I should do. I don't think he really cares what anyone thinks, he should do at this point. But I agree with you that part of it has been a little strange, and but it's 4 years, you get what you're going to get. With regard to Dulcich, I agree with you. I mean, the only thing I can say, I guess, is that, I don't think Chip Kelly's offense is built around like targeting specific players. I think it's more built around just like spreading the ball around and sort of wherever we're going to go today or wherever the formation takes you. I'm not saying that's the right approach. That's just generally what I've seen from him. I mean, I think if you look at his first year, we had Caleb Wilson, and he was one of our best receivers, and he was getting the ball like 10 times a game with Josh Rosen at QB, and it took him a really long time to get back into the fold with Chip Kelly, coordinating the offense. So it's a similar thing there. But he's just a weapon, right? I mean, you compared him to George Kittle earlier this year, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think that's a pretty on point comparison. So whether it's something with him, I doubt, or with just the overall scheming of the offense. But I totally agree with Jamal. I mean, it's been, with the lead, which generally has been how Chip Kelly teams have had to play. I think it's with the lead, quick reads, and pretty usually wide open reads for DTR, where he is, and getting a lot of run after the catch. So, I'd love to see them mix up this offense, involve those playmakers a little more. But I don't know if we're going to see it at this point. And yeah, I'm glad we have the run game, but that's been against kind of lesser opponents. We did struggle to run the ball against Fresno and against Arizona State. So, I'm hoping we can keep up with the run game there because we can't win if we can't run the ball at the end of the day. So again, yeah, like questions, right? Like things that we're kind of unsure about and that we're not sure are going to get fixed and that we need to see it in games, right? I think that's sort of, again, where everyone is with this program at this point.
I completely agree, and I want to pose a question to you guys that could be controversial among the fan base. Are we ready specifically for Ethan Garbers? I would like to see to open up the pass because we're going to have the run game anyways with our offensive line, with our two running backs back there. Are we ready for an Ethan Garbers or Chase Griffin? Because I think, like I said, if he struggles against Washington, I think I'm ready for that switch because we have the passing attack, like you said. Cam Brown's back there. By the way, we got to shout out Kyle Phillips. Kyle Phillips has been sensational this year. 6 touchdowns, really on his way to maybe his first all Pac-12 performance. Kyle Phillips has been a dog out there. We got to give him his due. But I think I might be ready for a change. Do you think that's crazy?
Yeah, I've been ready for it for years, right? But is it going to happen? I mean, Chip Kelly, I think he's been really ride or die with DTR. He really likes DTR. I don't really know why. I mean, if you look at going back to his first year, the plan was to start Wilton Speight, and then Speight got injured in the first game. DTR came back, looked pretty awful, and then Speight led us to a few wins toward the end of the season. Now, I think DTR has shown progress. And I'm with you. I'd like to see. I think this is a QB friendly offense. I'd like to see what it looks like with a guy like Ethan Garber. It's very high recruit. Now DTR was a pretty high recruit too, but it's been very clear that he's more of an athlete than a QB, and that he's been very good doing that at times, right? I mean, his peak is pretty high. It's more just the inconsistency and the ability to do the more kind of passer, nuanced quarterback type things, the accuracy, all that. But I just don't know if we're going to see it because, like, is this the ride or die season for Chip Kelly? If it ends up being a middling season, right, and he comes back next year, then I think the ceiling of the offense is higher with Ethan Garbers. I think he's a really good prospect, and I'd love to. I'm with you. I'd love to see what he can do, but I don't know that. This feels like Kelly's all in on DTR, so I just don't know if we're going to see it.
We'll see because this season has not transpired like I wish it had. If we get a loss or two coming up here, Chip Kelly's may need a quarterback switch just to keep his job in general. Jamal, are we ready for some Ethan Garbers, my man?
Well, it's a great question, and I think you have to sort of look at the schedule. And the bottom line is the Pac-12 South is a 3-horse race at this point, right? Colorado, Arizona, SC are out. This is a UCLA, Arizona State, Utah situation here. One of those 3 teams is going to win the South. And so UCLA needs to continue to apply the standings pressure to those teams and continue to get games. I completely agree with you. I think the barometer is Washington. You have to look at sort of a Washington team this year, talk about disappointment, sitting at 2-3, losing to FCS Montana, getting clubbed in the big house. They haven't scored more than 24 points in a regulation game all year. So in that game, you got to think the lack of explosiveness of Washington is going to enable UCLA to play the way they want to in terms of run heavy and go play action. You look at the game after that, it's Oregon. And truthfully, Oregon is a mirror image of UCLA. When you look at Brown at quarterback at Oregon and you look at DTR, you look at what Oregon is trying to do in terms of physical running game, play defense. Those are mirror image situations there. And you saw Oregon get flustered at Stanford earlier this year. I could see that happening again at the Rose Bowl. Then you look at Utah. Utah has a very physical defensive line. And I worry a little bit about Garbers' lack of mobility. That's not a great matchup. And so when you look at kind of the next 3 games, I agree with you. I don't think DTR has played well, but I think part of the conversation is also what really is the ceiling of DTR. He's a great athlete who, happens to play quarterback. He played 1 year of high school ball.
Right.
We tried to mold him into this Lamar Jackson-ish type of person. And, it's just not quite there. The cement is kind of hardened. And I think you gotta ride with the horse that brought you to the dance. And I think at this point, 6 games in left with still a Pac-12 South title, a Pac-12 title, and a possible Rose Bowl berth still very much in the cards. I think you got to ride or die DTR and then go to the Garbers era next year. Having said that, if he throws in a clunker against an offensively challenged Washington team, you have that second loss in conference, and now the South is sort of out of reach. I think the switch has to be made.
Yeah, I think it would take a lose. No, sorry. I think it would take a losing streak. I don't see Kelly just doing it just to see. I think he's too committed to DTR at this point. But I don't think anyone's disagreeing with you at this point. In terms of Westwood fans here.
I'm not saying what Chip Kelly's going to do. I'm saying what I would personally do. We just talked about those explosive wide receivers we had. They're not getting the action they want. I mean, he was 1 of 8 against a team that hasn't won a game this year. I mean, that is brutal in a first half. That's brutal for any Division I quarterback in a half. We got to get better than that. I know he wasn't 100%, but boy, it's like the downs are very down with him. The highs can be highs. No one was praising him more than I was in that gutsy performance against Stanford. That is probably the signature win of his career. He was awesome in that game. Showed a lot of, balls to come back out in the field with that injury and make a play, which was terrific. But I'm just kind of ready. I think that half was really brutal, especially for a team that bad. So I'm just saying, if I was in that position, Garbers might be my guy moving forward. And, I've got him, warming up on the sideline just in case if the first half doesn't go well for Washington. We got to move on to the defense, fellas. The secondary, I mean, there's just no way around it. They rank 126 in the country right now. It is as bad as it gets. I mean, they are the 5th worst passing defense in the entire country this year. We think because they got seniors coming back, it's going to make a difference. Grant, they've had injuries, but boy, Quentin Lake was out there this Saturday. Didn't really help. Stephen Blaylock, Jay Shaw, we've seen these guys for a couple of years. They have not gotten better. I'm going to throw it out right now. This has to be Jerry Azzanero's last year. This has to be Azzanero's last year. He has reached the pinnacle, I think, for UCLA fans in terms of what we can stand with when it comes to some of these defenses. We started off great. The rush defense has still been great, by the way. We ranked top 15 in the country in rush defense, which is a huge achievement. But, boy, that pass defense, that is the bottom of the barrel. Jamal, start me off with your thoughts on Azzanero's job and just the defense as a whole.
Yeah, it's a mess, Will, and there's no question about it. It's Azzanero's job is totally on the line. You talk about 7 starters that are seniors, and frankly, the secondary has played a selfish, undisciplined brand of ball. They're always looking to make the big play. They're trying to make the interception. They're trying to make the highlight play, and they're just getting burned time and again on just overcommitting to certain routes. And at some point, something needs to change there. I couldn't agree more. And to your point about the run defense being great, well, is that, the beauty of stats is that if I stop running, then my run defense is going to be great. Because if I walk through the air, I don't have to run. So that's a little bit of fool's gold there. But couldn't agree with you more. I think the problem with this secondary is they're so reliant on the pass rush. Right, they play physical, they play overly aggressive because they're relying on a rush where a quarterback's going to be under fire. He's not going to be able to get his feet set. He's not going to be able to process information. He's not going to be able to make his progressions, and these are going to be hurried and rushed throws. So you're beating receivers to the spot. When you can't get the pass rush and you can just sit back and sort of pick apart a defense, that's where really the nightmare starts happening. And so as much as this is about the secondary, this is also about the defense as a whole, which is exactly why Azzanero's got to go, even if this doesn't keep up and we sort of limp to the end, because this is sort of a cumulative effect here. The pass rush has to be stronger. This is a shell of the team that played LSU, that was menacing, that was nasty, that got after Max Johnson. We've been waiting for that. And truthfully, that's, I think, at the beginning of the year, Will, we were on the podcast. We talked about projections. We said, look, this is an 8 to 10 win team, potentially. Low end 8, high end 10. It's 4-2. They're at the midway point. They're due for 8. They're on schedule for 8, but yet it feels so disappointing. And that's because the highest of the highs was that performance against LSU, and they just haven't come close to replicating that on either side of the ball. Now, granted, LSU is not traditional LSU, but still, they just haven't passed the eye test, and it really starts defensively with the lack of physicality.
There have been some improvements on that side of the ball, too. I think Bo Calvert is a guy that we could say has tangibly improved. But, boy, if you're not getting to the quarterback and the quarterback gets the ball out, I mean, McLeod, the quarterback for U of A, nothing against McLeod. I'm just coming off of, knowledge. He might be the worst starting Pac-12 quarterback. I don't think a lot of people would have a lot to say with that. He was 21 of 30 through the air. I mean, he's completing over 60% of his passes against this secondary. It seems almost as if the quarterback gets enough time and he fires downfield, odds are it's going to be completion. Jay Shaw, Stephen Blaylock, we were just hoping just because they were upperclassmen that something would happen. This falls on Azzinaro. Azzinaro's got to take the fall for this one. Do you agree with that, Cary?
I mean, yeah, I think it's alarming in many ways, and it's not the first time we've seen it. I mean, I haven't looked at the rankings yet, thankfully, because it sounds like they're pretty bad. But what'd you say? They're close to 5th, 10th from the bottom.
They're 126 in the country.
Right, and I remember the 2018, or rather 2019, they were, I think, 128th in the country, right? And there are only 130 teams in the FBS, so. Yeah, it's not good, and I think Jamal hit the nail on the head. You saw what you saw in those first 2 games was a defense that was being aggressive, that was getting to the quarterback, and that kind of shielded a lot of the issues on the back end. But it's similar to what we said about the offense, that they can't play well if they don't have a lead because they can't then run the football and do the play action. Similarly on the defense, right? If they can't get into those pressure packages and force the defense to kind of play from behind, then, they can kind of sit back and pick this defense apart. And I think even in LSU, right, that second half, Keishon Butte kind of killed us, but we were up by like 3 scores, so it didn't really matter, right? But when you get into these close games, it's just clearly not a defense you can trust. And I think a lot of things here go back to, some of the bigger problems of the Chip Kelly era. Number one, like you said, Will, we're assuming because these guys are seniors that, and experience that they'd figure it out. But just because you have experience doesn't mean it's good experience, right? I think Quantrez Knight has looked good at times, but I also think he's had trouble staying healthy, which has been an issue for him in the past
Same
as well.
With Quinn Lake. Same with Quinn Lake.
Right.
It's the same thing every year.
And I remember a lot of articles were talking about how during the Arizona State game they lost their 2 safeties, but one of those safeties, I forget his name, not Quentin Lake, but the other one got beat on one of the earlier touchdowns even before he left injured, right? And that Arizona State game was especially alarming for me because they couldn't do anything right. They had a screen go yards after catch for touchdown. They had deep down the sidelines. They had coverage busts in the middle of the field. So you're seeing coverage busts and you're seeing bad tackling. And it's just a mess. And again, going back to Chip Kelly, number one, he's kind of, Jerry Azzinaro has kind of followed him everywhere, right? And that's sort of this sort of nepotism, right, that we see at times from him, similar to the conversation we were having about Urban Meyer. But number two, he's never been a great defensive coach, right? He's kind of an offensive guy. So even if Jerry Azzinaro does take the fall here, can this defense be anything more than average? You kind of need a great offense to compensate for that, which, maybe it could be that with Ethan Garbers, but it's not at the moment. So yeah, it's alarming. I mean, a big reason that Jim Mora was let go was because of the defense. They could not stop anyone. They had Josh Rosen at quarterback and they were losing games 50-40, right? Fast forward to the first year and it looked like it wasn't a good defense, but there was some movement, and it's just been all downhill since then. I struggle to think about, when we play USC, are they just going to, not that this is a good USC team, but I remember when we played them a few years ago. Yeah, they tore us up through the air. So, again, I think you can't like what you see. If you're in triple digits, right, I think that's never a good sign, right? So, unfortunately, just another unit here and personnel that hasn't developed the way we'd hoped, and I don't think there's a clear solution here. There is a clear solution, but I don't know if that's going to solve all the problems, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel it. I just want to know what Azanero has on Chip Kelly. Like, does he have some like top secret information?
I think they're just buddies. I think that's all it is, right? I mean, yeah.
I
don't
hope
know.
so. But like at this point, it's like the axe needs to be grinded. This guy needs to get out of there. And they're just not doing anything about it. Jerry, let us know what you have on Chip, man, because you've kept your job far longer than you should have in terms of UCLA fans. So we got to get him out of there. I do want to talk about this upcoming, this is what we've been talking about all year, the 3-game stretch, Washington, Oregon, Utah. I kind of want to get some of your predictions for these games. I think taking 2 of these 3 would be a massive success for UCLA, given what we've seen. Kind of give me your breakdown. What do you think about this, Jamal, with UW, Oregon, Utah, and what are your predictions?
Yeah, well, it's obviously it's a 3-game stretch. It's a gauntlet. When you look at what UCLA is and has and what Washington is and has, this really should be a win. This was a game we sort of looked at the start of the year and said, oh my God, this is potentially going to be one of the biggest games of the year. And Washington just has not answered the mail in terms of performance or their roster construction. Now, granted, given all of the inconsistencies of UCLA the last few weeks, they come into this game a 2-point underdog, all things considered. But you got to think, given where this team is trying to go, and I think, Will, you've sort of alluded to it, is the urgency. I mean, this is such a golden opportunity. When you talk about the landscape of college football in Los Angeles, it's always kind of been SC has football, UCLA has basketball. Every 10 or 15 years, that door opens and an opportunity for that narrative to flip on its head. And it happened 10 years ago when SC was on sanctions. Hundley was there. 29 wins in 3 years. He almost was able to sort of nudge it in UCLA's favor. They just couldn't quite win that last game to turn those division titles into conference titles, those Alamo Bowls into Rose Bowls, those good seasons into historic ones. This is that opportunity for UCLA. SC's a 3-ring circus. This is the chance UCLA has for this to become both a football and a basketball city from a powder and gold standpoint. And that's the urgency that I think you feel, Will, that we feel, and this is that opportunity. And so with having said all of that, I think Washington is a win. I think Oregon is somewhat fraudulent. I think that this is a team that, is very susceptible to the same things that UCLA is. And when you get them in a hostile environment, I have the same questions about Anthony Brown as I do with DTR, if not more. And Anthony Brown's ceiling is lower than DTR's. And so I think if UCLA, with that Rose Bowl crowd, with that energy, if they can sort of get after it, I think that's a win as well. I think the tough one's going to be at Utah. That's a tough place to play. Their line is very strong. I think they played inspired ball with all of the tragedies that took place with their team the last 6 months. I thought it was a super class move by Chip Kelly to organize a condolence card to send to Utah, which really makes you proud as a Bruin fan, as what this brand and institution represents. I think that's a tough game. So I think it's going to be 2-1. I think they're going to get the first 2. I think that Utah one is going to be the one that maybe is the L, and they're going to be 6-3 after this stretch.
Before I go to Cary, I do want to talk about a couple points there. Kyle Whittingham is one of the most underrated coaches, not only in the Pac-12, but the entire country. I think the team has something to rally around. Thoughts and prayers out to Aaron Lowe and his family. I know he tragically passed away. That's a terrible story. But Utah is a team that just doesn't go away. I mean, we thought that San Diego State loss was going to plague them. They've kind of heated up a little bit themselves, went into the Coliseum. I mean, granted, it is an SC team that is not the same, but beat the living crap out of this SC team. So I think this is a team that's starting to gain momentum. It was the first time they had won since, I believe, 1914 in the Coliseum, which is crazy to say. Cameron Rising has looked to have established himself as the starting quarterback there. That will be a tough game. The Oregon one's going to be fun. And I know Chip Kelly can tone it down as much as he wants to say, saying, hey, this doesn't mean much to me. He's the guy who built that program to kind of be what it is. That's going to be a fun one. And if you're a UCLA fan and you're not tuning into that game, I got to question your fandom a little bit, because that's going to be the most fun game of the year. I think you're right. We do get up for those big games. It's the smaller games we take for granted. Instance, the Fresno State game. They're not a small team. They're very competitive, but the week after LSU dropped the ball on that. Arizona State, we could have done better. I mean, not a small game either, but also not as big as your Oregon, your USC, things like that. I mean, we just saw it this past weekend. University of Arizona, small game, should have been a blowout, was not. I think we get up for Oregon too. If we win that game, I think it's going to be a coin toss. We'll see what happens there. But I'm liking our chances. Cary, give me your thoughts on that 3-game stretch, brother.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's hard to make predictions for UCLA because they're just so unpredictable, right? They lose games they're supposed to win. They win games they're supposed to lose. But, assuming things go as planned, the Washington game should be a win. The only question I have there is, A, it's a tough place to play, and B, whenever a team it kind of has their back against the wall, right? You never know when they're going to have that coming out kind of game, but they haven't really shown us anything yet against any meaningful competition, and I think they're running this kind of outdated offense, which I think we should be able to handle, right? Hopefully, Jamal, when you say this could be the year for you, so I can feel you pleading through the screen, hoping that these UCLA players can capture your energy and hear you. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I can feel that on your side. Utah, I mean, I don't think it's as good a team as they were in the past, but you pretty much know what you're going to get with Kyle Whittingham, as you said, Will, and it's going to be a competitive, well-coached team. And we've shown pretty much nothing against them in the past. I think this game is on the road, right? The Utah game
in Salt Lake. Yeah, it'll be a tough one.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a tough one. Some bold takes on Oregon by our friend Jamal here. I'm not sure I'd go that far. I think it's a good point that they are sort of a mirror of us in terms of questionable quarterback, good running game. Don't make them throw the ball. But I think they're a much nicer looking mirror than we are, so to speak. It was early in the season, but to go in to Columbus and come out with a win, I don't care who you are. That's not easy to do, right? And I just trust Mario Cristobal and Joe Moorhead, especially. I think more than I trust our coaching staff. So I'm not. I think the home field advantage does help. I think it'll be a good one. It'll be a close one. I think there's a good chance we get up for it, but I can't in good faith predict a win for us in that game. I'm sorry, guys.
I understand that. I will make a proclamation, though. If Chip Kelly is able to beat Oregon while they still have a top 10 ranking, I think regardless of what happens the rest of the season, his job is safe. I think he will get back for another year. If he can have two big, marquee victories over LSU and Oregon this year, I think Chip Kelly, even if he may lose the next 5 games, I think his job is safe at least for another year. I will say that.
Yeah, let me just add just quickly, Will, and I think the one thing that makes us all a little more hesitant about this UCLA team is we were all on top of the world after the LSU win, right? I mean, that was a program defining win probably. And it still is, but LSU's not looking that good. And Ed Ogeron might not keep his job at this point. So I think that unfortunately, and I hate to be a curmudgeon here, that does draw a bit into question just how impressive that win was when you're looking at an LSU team that just is flailing right now and is not the SEC powerhouse that we are used to seeing from them.
Oh, it definitely does. LSU, I mean, Orgeron's probably as much in the hot seat right now as Kelly is. I think that's a real situation. It was more so beating a team of that talent level that had just come off of winning a national championship. LSU is a brand. When you think of, when I was growing up, Miami football had all the guys in the league, Ray Lewis, right. I mean, that's what LSU is today. Oh, you mean Odell Beckham, Joe Burrow, Jarvis Landry, Patrick Peterson, all those guys went to LSU. That's crazy. They're a brand. They're a fan base. We did it in prime time. It may be a little over-exaggerated, but for UCLA, a team that needed to kind of get some national attention to beat LSU on that stage, I still think that's a big win for them. And I think, they're probably part of the reason that Ed Orgeron is on the hot seat. So I'm going to take that as a positive moving forward. But the last question I'm going to leave you guys with is when all is said and done through 12 games, we're at 6 games right now. How many wins does UCLA have? Give me the total season record. Jamal, I'm starting with you. Where are we going?
Well, we're going to be 9-3.
Oh,
and, it's going to be 9-3. I think when you look at the schedule, I said it's 2-1, and I'll double down even further for you guys because I truly believe this in my heart. I am more confident about UCLA beating Oregon than I am about them beating Washington.
Whoa!
Oregon is completely fraudulent. Just because they are 9th in the country, they would not be 9th in the country if it wasn't for this nonsense called preseason college football polls. Just because they're the best team in the Pac-12 doesn't mean they're good. The Pac-12 is wide open. And I see Cristobal. I like Cristobal. He's a hell of a recruiter. He is in the bottom half of the Pac-12 as a game manager and as a play calling adjuster. When you put Oregon into hostile environments, they will fold like Charmin, in the words of the late, great Kobe Bryant. So I am more confident about UCLA beating Oregon than I am about Washington. 2-1 in that stretch. Then you've got Colorado. You've got Cal. Those are 2 winnable games. And then the big one against SC with the state of SC, it depends on who their quarterback's going to be. I think a Drake London, Quantrez Knight matchup is going to be really, get your popcorn ready for that. But I think this has to be the year. It's the year of the streaks. Everybody seems to be beating SC in the Coliseum. UCLA's only done it once since 97. I think they get it done. They go to 9-3, and then we'll see. That puts them at 7-2 in the conference, and we'll see where the chips fall with Arizona State and Utah.
Love it. This is awesome. A 9-3 prediction from Jamal Madni. This is why we have the Bruin Bible, to make predictions like this. Cary, give me your prediction, man.
Yeah, no, I'm just still mentally recovering from the bomb that was just detonated right in front of my face. Fraudulent. Those are. I mean, you talk about statement wins. Do you think UCLA goes into Columbus and comes out with a win? I mean, the answer is very clearly no.
I appreciate the transitive property of if A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then A's got to be greater than C. But the bottom line is,
no, I'm not saying the transitive property.
You can't put too much stock in a September win. That was when we talk about defenses struggling. That Ohio State defense did not know who they were in September. A lot of young players breaking in. That was a shell of the team that is the team today. They didn't really get real Ohio State. I get it. They went into Columbus, but when you factor in it's September, look, CJ Verdell is out for the season. Oregon has got some key injuries here. This is he's kind of put on the West Coast. Sometimes we have to deal with the West Coast bias of college football. And what that tends to do is we have to put teams on pedestals in our conference that don't really warrant that pedestal. 2021 Oregon is that team.
Oh, man. Well, Cary, I need a prediction, my man.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I'm giving them 7 wins. I think they take care. I think they take care of Cal, Washington, and either USC or Wazoo, and I think they lose to Utah and Oregon. So, I'm giving them 7 wins.
7 wins. All right. I'm going to go with 8-4. I'm going to go right in between you guys. I think if they can beat Oregon, though, I think they win the last 5 games of the year. Or the last 4 or 5 games of the year. So if they beat Oregon, they go into Utah with that kind of, we just beat the Ducks, we're feeling good. Get that victory. Cal, they're going to win. I feel very confident about that. Colorado might have maybe even a worse offense than University of Arizona. I foresee that being a victory. SC, I mean, something can come out. Rivalry games can be weird sometimes. Maybe the passion favors SC, but just from what I've seen, you got to pencil in Drake London getting his numbers. But other than that, they don't have a lot of guys that scare us right now at the moment. And I would take our run game, milking the clock at the end of it to seal it. 8-4 UCLA heading into a bowl game, and they could potentially get to 9 wins. I think that's a victory when it comes to UCLA fans. Keeps Chip with his job. Granted, they still got to fire Azanero. Whether that happens or not, we don't know. But, boy, I love it, guys. This was a great episode of the Bruin Bible. We're signing out.